Welcome to Ogles channel, thanks for watching today. Let's continue journeying through every Game Boy and Game Boy Color game, and today we're going to focus on a game called Donkey Kong Land. Now most people look at Donkey Kong Land, they sort of assume it's a stripped down version of Donkey Kong Country, because the graphics are very similar. However, it's actually got its own levels, its own bosses, its own mechanics, several unique enemies inside the game. It's very much its own game. It just simply has a very strong resemblance to Donkey Kong Country, just very downgraded. And the game bases its entire storyline around the idea that the graphics are downgraded from the Super Nintendo to the Game Boy, because in the game's manual it talks about how Cranky tells Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong that people only played Donkey Kong Country because the graphics were so good. Of course, Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong say, no, people played the game because it was so much fun. And Cranky said, no, if it was on the 8-bit system like a Nintendo or a Game Boy, people wouldn't even want to play the game because the graphics aren't as good. And of course, Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong continue to argue against it, and Cranky, to prove his point, gets King K. Rool to steal all the bananas again and forces Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong to journey through an 8-bit adventure to get their banana horde back, which is of course the game that we're playing here. And I guess his ultimate goal is to try to prove that people aren't going to like this game because it's an ugly game. And Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong are trying to prove that people are still going to like this game because the gameplay is so much fun. And I guess the verdict is out at the moment. Are people going to enjoy this game because it's fun, or are they not going to enjoy this game because the graphics are so bad? And I guess as we journey through, we'll try to figure that out for ourselves. Before we jump into the main game here, I always like to start these off by looking at the box art first. As we look at the box art for Donkey Kong Land, it's very much based on its ideas or art style off of the Donkey Kong Country series, because it's all done in computer animation, and it looks really, really good here. Of course, you got Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong center stage there. You got one of the new enemies down here at the bottom. I believe his name is Hard Hat, because he's a little mole who can throw his hat inside the game here. Of course, you got one of the buff Crimlantis in the background there. Of course, the iconic bee there. And you also have this new enemy that's floating around here. This little pig with wings on it. And that is a Hogwash. And he's new to the Donkey Kong Land game. And of course, the scenery around here too. You got the jungles and the snow and the mountains in the background. And all of those are landscapes we're going to travel throughout the game. Overall, the cover for this game, it's pretty top notch. Now when you start the game up here, you pretty much just jump straight to the title screen here. And of course you got Donkey Kong, Diddy Kong, and Rambi all on the main screen there. And there's no animation really to go along with it. There's no storyline to go along with it. All the story I talked about earlier is actually in the game's manual. And that would have really helped out here, because some of the stuff in the game is not going to make a lot of sense without having sort of the background knowledge. But regardless, we do have a pretty decent looking title screen here to try to show off how good the graphics can be on the Game Boy. Now when you begin the game here, of course you create your little save file. It takes you to the first overworld map, which is going to be Gangplank Galleon Ahoy. And there's no better way to describe this first overworld map except to be a pixelated mess. I mean, it's pretty rough looking. I mean, you got the ship or the galleon in the background here, and that part's pretty obvious. But when you get down to the bottom part of the screen with the trees and, you know, the jungle, it's pretty rough looking down there. They're really trying to just sort of take Donkey Kong Country and shrink it down to being on the Game Boy. And I think it'd been a little bit better, at least for the overworld maps, if they could have just sort of created something different, maybe a little bit more simplified, so you can see what's going on a little bit better. But then we start level 1 up, and you can tell from the get-go, the developers are trying to show players this is still Donkey Kong Country, in spirit at least, because you got all the core things there. You got Donkey Kong, you got Diddy Kong, you got all the core enemies, like the Kremlins are there, the snakes are there, you got the jungles aesthetic, you can actually get Rambi in this level, all this in the first level, you even collect the K-O-N-G letters throughout the level. I mean, they are really trying to show players that this is Donkey Kong Country, at least in spirit. However, when you're looking at the graphics of this game, I don't think anyone can deny that this game has aged pretty poorly as the years have gone by. Because it's like they tried to take everything they could from the Super Nintendo game and just shrink it down to Game Boy, and they didn't account too much for what could and couldn't be seen with a two-tone color palette here. Because it is pretty hard to see some things on the screen. Now some levels will obviously be better than other ones, but this first level and several of the levels coming up, it is pretty hard to see. Now when I was a kid in like 6th grade when I got this game, I didn't notice that at all, because I didn't have Donkey Kong Country and I really wanted to play it, and this was the only option I had, and so it looked amazing for a kid in 6th grade. But looking at how it aged a little bit, it is not aged very well at all, and the graphics are pretty rough for this game. But this whole review is not focused on graphics, this is focused on the game itself, but I had to at least mention the graphics before we got too far into the game. But level 1 holds up, at least in spirit, pretty well for what Donkey Kong Country is known for. But then we move on to level 2 here, and level 2 focuses on a winter aesthetic, and it's a little weird to be going from the jungle aesthetic to the winter aesthetic so fast, especially on such a small mini-map here. But regardless, we got a snow level, and I always tend to love snow levels. But even more of our core enemies are back in this level. We got the gophers in this level, we got the bees in this level, we got our new enemies exclusive for Donkey Kong Land, Hogwash in this level, the little pig with the wings I was talking about earlier. But it's a pretty standard snow Donkey Kong level. I really think they're trying to show players at the beginning of the game here just how much of Donkey Kong Country spirit is present in this game, whether it's the jungle or the snow or your animals you're riding on. I think they really want to just sort of show it off straight out the gates. Now level 3 leaves the snow aesthetic behind, brings us back to the jungle aesthetic, and it's a little weird to be swapping biomes back and forth so fast in the game, but regardless, we're back in the jungle, and it's pretty much more the same as level 1. Nothing new is really introduced here, just sort of more of the same of Donkey Kong jungle aesthetic. But level 4 here, it really mixes the aesthetic up here, and it takes us to a pirate level. Now to my memory, there's actually not even a pirate level in Donkey Kong Country. There's only one in Donkey Kong Country 2, but I'm not positive on that. It's been a while since I've played either one of those games. But regardless, here we are, we have a pirate aesthetic, and you basically get to climb all the little ropes, the little galleons here, journey through this level. It's a pretty fun little level, and it really mixes it up. I personally don't like the soundtrack for this level. I think it's one of the worst soundtracks in the game. To me, it just has a little bit of a nursery rhyme effect on it. But regardless of the soundtrack for this level, this is actually one of the most visually appealing levels in the entire game, just because there's such a contrast between the background and the foreground that you can really see what's going on inside the level or when you're playing it. I think a lot of the other levels could have taken advantage of this if they just simply minimized what was happening in the background and focused more on the foreground. But at the end of the level, you do find a pretty unique item here. You find a barrel with a bomb on it, and of course you can use this bomb barrel to blow up rocks on the main map. And it's pretty unique to the Game Boy game as far as like finding items in the main level to use on the main map. I don't recall that being in the Super Nintendo games at all, but I could be wrong on that. But regardless, I blow up the top rocks here, and off I head off to level 5, which is of course yet again another snow level. They really love bouncing back and forth with these, and it's just so confusing. But this snow level is a little bit different than the last one, because that one was just more of a standard, run through platforming level, where this one tends to focus more on like your rope jumping, which is another core mechanic of Donkey Kong games. And so, I mean, obviously they're going to bring it in at some point, but every level tends to bring in just one more aspect to try to keep the spirit of Donkey Kong alive. Now level 6, not wanting to get stale, takes us back to the pirate ship once again, and it's pretty much similar to the last level, but it's a lot longer this time around. And also you have more snakes coming down the little gallows or little ropes as you're trying to go through. And some of these can get pretty challenging, but I did figure out if you climb all the way to the top of the rope and traverse at that part, the snakes don't come down anymore. Because I don't know where the spawn part is for the snakes, but it's not at the top, because when you're up there, they don't spawn there. So you can actually traverse these ropes a whole lot easier as you're journeying through the level. Once I figured that out, this level went through in just a breeze. But it is a little bit longer than the first one as far as like just pure length of the level. But then we move on to level 7. Now we're going back to the jungle here, but to me this is where the game like truly picks up to be like a Donkey Kong game, because there's so much stuff in here that just reminded me so much of the experience of playing Donkey Kong. For example, like when you pick up the barrel, throw it down here and you just simply follow in the barrel, taking all these enemies out. I love that. It's just pure joy as you're watching the barrel take out all the enemies in a row. And this one also tended to focus on like speed running through the level. As far as like if you timed it just right, you could bounce on every Kremlin or every enemy as you're going in order to just maximize your time through the level. And that's one thing I loved about Donkey Kong Country, is if you did it quickly, it's like everything just lined up absolutely perfect. And this level felt like it was designed to work in that way. Also, just simply going up into the trees, everything just felt so natural in this level as opposed to some of the earlier ones. Earlier ones, it felt like they were just trying to sort of show off, this is Donkey Kong, this is what it can do, we got all the core enemies, all the core, mechanics, where this one tended to focus more on like what Donkey Kong is all about as far as like gameplay wise. And I really did enjoy the way level 7 played. It was also around this time I realized that collecting all the individual KONG letters or the Kong letters is actually like a huge deal in this game, because if you don't collect them, you can't save your game until you beat a boss. And so if you run out of lives, you go all the way back to your last checkpoint, and you might actually have to play all these levels over again. Some levels it's really hard to find the KONG letters, but when you can find them, be pretty appreciative, because you can actually save your game. But then we journey on to level 8 here, and level 8 takes us back to a snow level again, which we've already discussed how weird that is. But when you're in this level, it once again tends to keep what I consider the spirit of Donkey Kong alive, and that's the idea of being able to play through these levels fast and everything just lining up perfectly. If you go through all these different barrels in the snow level, you're just going to fly through this level in no time, and I love that aspect about it as like rewarding the player for taking chances. And that's what level 8 really tended to do here, and to me, like I said, that's keeping the spirit of Donkey Kong Country alive. But then we get level 9, and holy cow, level 9 is just a awful boss battle. The bosses in Donkey Kong Country were always like giant enemies from the level that you just went through, or pretty epic, or just a lot of fun. This one, it's so random. It's a manta ray or a stingray here, and it just floats in the air, and it just comes down, you just hop on it, and then another one appears, and you hop on that one, and it just doesn't make any sense. There were no water levels in this entire first stage here, this first overworld. This enemy wasn't throughout that at all. It doesn't even make sense for a manta ray to be even floating in the air like this. This just feels like such a random boss battle they just sort of threw in there. They didn't have any other idea to put a boss in here, so they sort of threw it out there, and it's a pretty awful boss. But then we get to our second overworld, or our second map here, and it's called Crimlantis, which obviously is playing on Atlantis, which means half the city is above water and the other half's going to be underwater. And that title actually makes these levels make way more sense, because otherwise you're like, why am I fighting in the ruins, and then why am I fighting underwater, or why am I battling underwater? It doesn't make any sense. But if you actually know the title of the level, or the title of the overworld, these levels make way more sense than what the first levels do. Now the first level inside Crimlantis is going to focus more like the temple ruins from Donkey Kong Country, and you know, your core stuff is back here. You got your little rolling tires, you move back and forth. You got your buffed up Kremlin who's walking through as well. It's very much of the same aesthetic, same feel, very easy to see as far as like contrast goes between the background and the foreground. I like that as well. This is an overall pretty darn fun level inside the game. But also the music for these particular levels with this aesthetic is a fantastic soundtrack. Just give a small sample listen here. To me, is one of the best songs in the entire game, and I think it still holds up. Now, while this level does give us another appearance of Rami the Rhino, there is one core thing missing from this, and that was this giant wheel in the Super Nintendo game. And I understand it's not a remake of the game, so it's not going to have the exact same stuff. But there's one part where this giant wheel is like following you through the level, and you have to run to outrun the wheel, and they didn't include it. And they didn't include any of the ruins levels, and that's something that we could have really like upped the fun of these temple levels, because I always loved outrunning that wheel. But regardless, this is still one of the better levels inside the game. Now, level 2 takes us underwater, and according to the overworld map, it doesn't say anything about going underwater. But if you know the story of Crimlantis, it makes a little bit more sense, but still I think the overworld map could have done a better job as far as like showing what's coming next. Now, this first water level focuses like truly being underwater in a temple, which focuses on the Crimlantis theme really well. And this water level does look pretty good as far as like the contrast, really easy to see. But I've never liked water levels in games, and I specifically never liked the ones in Donkey Kong Country, so I am sort of against these levels from the get-go. But as you're going through, you're going to see a lot of fish inside these levels. You have these little jellyfish that sort of clam up, that sort of float down and pull back up to the surface. And really the best way to get by them is just sort of be a bottom dweller and work your way across the bottom, because they tend to come down slower than they shoot up. And as I'm going through the level, I did end up finding the secret exit for this level, but there's actually no difference in the secret exit and the main exit as far as like what the overworld map does. And I was a little disappointed on that. I mean, they had the whole like split path thing earlier as far as like finding the bomb barrel in the level, and I really felt like a secret exit would take me somewhere special, but it didn't. It's just a normal exit, and it just takes you on the same route. I really don't even know why to even do a secret exit. Now, level 3 is going to continue the underwater theme here, but you're not in the ruins anymore. You're more just sort of like the open sea. It's more akin to like the normal Donkey Kong Country underwater levels. I really dislike this one probably a little more than the last one, because it's getting a little more claustrophobic, and the next one's going to be even worse than this one. But of course, we got some of the main enemies here. You got the clams once again, a lot of different fish throughout the level. Evidently, there's a new fish exclusive for Donkey Kong Land itself, but I mean, they all look pretty much the same inside the game to me, so I'm not sure which one is the exclusive fish for this game. But evidently the exclusive fish is in this level. Now, after this level, you go back to the overworld map, and you have more splitting off paths here. And you also have a path that you need to take that has more rocks in front of it that you have to blow up with one of those little bomb barrels. And you don't know which level the bomb barrel is hid in. And so you're looking around the overworld map here, and you do see off to the side here a giant clam, and you're like, man, I cannot wait to fight that boss fight, because that giant clam just looks awesome. Especially since that last boss fight was so underwhelming. This one's going to be absolutely amazing. But regardless, we can't do that yet. We're going to have to actually search for this bomb. So I ended up choosing to level up to the north, hoping to find the bomb. And so we'd go ahead and journey into level 6. Now, level 4 is once again above ground inside the temple ruins, but they had a few new mechanics from the last time around. We got the little tire tornadoes that you sort of go through, where you can bounce on those. You have the little snake baskets where the little snakes pop out, the little TNT barrels to throw at them to try to blow those up. But you also have different platforming elements where you have to actually hop on top of some of the snake baskets as you go. It's a pretty fun level, mixes things up a little bit, not the same as the last ruins level, and I like that. I like levels with the same background aesthetic, but different mechanics, and it actually fulfills that pretty well. Now, to close the level, we come across a little bomb barrel, so I guess I lucked out. I chose the right path here. We get the bomb barrel, we head back to the overworld map, we blow it up, and we're heading on to level 5. Now, according to the overworld map, level 5 looks like it's going to be a cave, but for some reason we're underwater again, and it just goes to show that the overworld map almost means nothing as far as like predicting what type of level you're getting ready to go into. Now, this underwater level is even more claustrophobic than the last one, and instead of having like the little octopus that come around and follow you around like in the Super Nintendo version, now we have these little nautilus, and they come out and they start chasing you through the level. And man, I hate the underwater levels in general, but I hate being chased through the underwater levels. And it's just like they continue following you through pretty much the entire level, and it just gets so annoying. We end up like moving past all these passages. I missed the entire Kong letters to collect, try to save the game, and I found this level very frustrating, but that's nothing against the Game Boy game here. That's just simply water levels in Donkey Kong in general. But then we move on to level 6, and level 6 is once again above ground, but this one actually throws in a few little tricks our way, as far as like little traps we can fall into, because I was on this little platform here, or this little rope here. I see these little bananas down below. Of course, I'm going to drop down to get the bananas. Now I'm stuck in a hole of an armadillo, and unless you are with Donkey Kong, it's really hard to kill the armadillo, so you're desperately trying to jump out of the hole, and it's a pretty fun little trap here. I enjoy games that put little tricks in there to try to get you to get a good item, and you end up falling into a trap. Mega Man does it a lot, and I enjoy that in the game. Now level 7, of course, we have our second boss fight, and I'm expecting that giant clam to come about that we saw on the map earlier, and we do get a clam. We have this itty bitty clam that's like the same size as us. Now how deceitful is that to have that giant clam on the map, but you have this little itty bitty one? But regardless, this boss is actually still pretty fun, because what you have to do is he basically shoots out these little pearls at you, but you have these little reflective clams around the edges, and you have to basically stand in front of that to bait him to shooting a pearl at that, and then you move just in time to reflect it and shoots himself back with the pearl. And you have to do this multiple times, and it's pretty easy, but at least it's a different mechanic, and it actually matches with the level that you just came out of. So overall, I think it's a pretty good boss battle. And then we move on into the Monkey Mountains, or the Chimpanzee Clouds, and to me, this is where the snow levels should have fit in from the beginning of the game, and I don't know why I didn't put them into this particular overworld, but regardless, it's going to be all mountain levels and cloud levels, and some of these are really fun, and some of these are absolutely miserable. But before we jump into the first level, it's actually on this overworld map here that it finally dawned on me what's sort of missing. All the parts of the overworld are just level, 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 level. There's no like in-between parts. We have like little bonus games where you can see like Cranky Kong or Funky Kong or Candy Kong. They're all missing. All the main characters of this game are completely absent. And I really think that adds a lot to the Donkey Kong Country experience, or the Donkey Kong experience, is seeing all these little characters, and it would have really helped having Cranky, throughout the levels, continuing that story that's completely absent from the actual game that was included in the manual. That's how they should have done it, but they chose just to leave him out completely. But anyway, we're getting ready to head into level 1 here, and according to the overworld map, it's on a little cliff here, so we're expecting a pretty cool mountain level. So naturally, the game gives us a cave level, because the game just has no clue how to match levels with the overworld. But the cave level is pretty standard for a cave level in Donkey Kong. I mean, you're missing like your frog, as far as like, your animal friend, or even like the parrot, I think, in the mine levels. All that's gone. You don't have anything cool like that. You just simply have like the tire, and like the cave where you sort of duck down and go under little cave walls. I mean, it's a pretty standard cave level. Not that great, but nothing special about the level either. But level 2 now. Level 2 actually does give us something brand new, and it actually takes us to the side of the mountain, which I was hoping level 1 would do, but it's actually something completely unique for Donkey Kong Land. Because as you're fighting up to the side of the mountain here, you have all these different little platforms you're going through. You have these little caverns or little holes in the side of the mountain that actually throw rocks out at you. You have rocks falling from the ceiling as well. It's actually a pretty unique level, and it's pretty fun as you're going through it. You do get Rammy once again, as far as like your rhinoceros, because that makes sense on the side of the mountain to have a rhinoceros here. But anytime you get hit by a rock, you have to get off Rammy, then get back on Rammy. You get hit by another rock, have to get off Rammy, get back on Rammy. But that wouldn't be so annoying if it wasn't for the fact that when you get Rammy, you're getting ready to head straight into an avalanche here, and you're going to be basically knocked off, back on, back off, back on, back on, back on. And it's just a constant overflow of back off and back on. And it is really annoying, and you actually sort of wish that you didn't even have Rammy. Now, I know originally in the game, you're actually supposed to have like a different animal buddy, which would be like a mountain goat. And that's probably where this mountain goat was supposed to be. And it probably would have made way more sense and would have been way more fun. But regardless, something got cut in the game, and we got a rhinoceros on a mountain. But it's still a pretty good level as an overall. If you thought a rhinoceros on a mountain didn't make sense, wait till we get to level 3 here. Because in level 3, we actually go into a cloud level. And in the cloud level, we have these random shapes with hearts all over them. And it just makes no sense whatsoever how this relates to anything in the Donkey Kong world to have all these shapes and whatnot. If they want to do a cloud level, they should just put more clouds in the background. Some very light colored clouds or very light shaded clouds, and have the main clouds throughout that you're going to have to hop on. That would have made way more sense than putting all these random shapes. But regardless, the level itself, you basically hop on this little roller coaster, and it runs you through the level, and you sort of have to time it right to jump over enemies or jump to the next roller coaster. And it's a pretty basic level. It is unique for this game, and I would give them that. But the level itself, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, level 4 is another cave level. Not a lot to say about it, so I'm going to sort of skip over it pretty quick here, but it's just another cave level. Now, level 5 though, level 5 is back to the clouds, and they changed the gameplay for this one. And you have this little, instead of just traveling on a roller coaster, you're on a little platform here. And every time you jump on the platform, every time it hits a wall, it changes directions. And that sounds like it could be a unique, fun mechanic. But this is the most frustrating mechanic and frustrating level in the entire game. And I would actually nominate this to be the worst level in the game. I've never been more frustrated in this game trying to get the platform to turn in the right direction, trying to avoid an enemy, trying to get certain letters, or trying to get a certain barrel. Oh my gosh, this level took me forever to complete, and I would be satisfied to never step foot on another platform like this again inside a game. I absolutely hated this level. But a lot of times when games give you a level that's absolutely horrible and you hate so much, they try to give you a pretty easy, fun level next, and that's exactly what they did with level 6. You go back to the mountains or the cliffside here, and it's very similar to the last one, except with the rocks are much more plentiful this time, but I figured out a little trick here. If you sort of just run through the area, go as fast as you can, as soon as you see the rocks, they won't hit you. You can just basically speed through these levels. And that to me, once again, brings back the spirit of Donkey Kong as far as like trying to go through the levels as fast as you can and rewarding players for playing the game quickly. And so I actually like this level quite a bit. Now level 7 takes us back to the clouds, and thank goodness they didn't do the same little platform thing here. You actually just simply have to time your jumps from cloud to cloud before they disappear. And it's a pretty fun level as an overall. You do get your little ostrich friend here, but as soon as you get the ostrich friend, I mean, you have him for like, or have her for like 10 seconds. Then you hop into a bonus barrel and you lose her for the rest of the level. So that's sort of useless to even have her in the game for such a short amount of time here. But overall, this cloud level is way easier and way better than the second, or even probably the first one as well. It actually makes sense having clouds in the clouds for a cloud level. I mean, it was called Chimpanzee Clouds. Why they waited so long to put the clouds in there? I don't know. But regardless, this is probably the most fun cloud level in the game. Now the boss for this overworld here is going to actually be a little mole here, a little hard hat. I mean, his name is Hard Hat, and he's a pretty easy mechanic here. He pops out of his little hole, throws his head at you, and all you have to do is hop on his head. He goes back in his hole, pops back up, throws his head at you, and obviously he gets a heck of a lot faster as you go. But it's pretty easy to just simply hop on his head. You have to time it right at the beginning, but I actually think it gets easier as you go, because toward the end, as soon as he pops up, he throws his hat, so you just simply jump in his direction as soon as he pops up, and you're guaranteed to hit him. I mean, it's an easy battle, but it's a pretty fun little boss battle. I still miss the ideas in the main game or in the Super Nintendo game of having like giant bosses coming at you, but I understand, we're on the Game Boy, we do what we can, and we actually got a pretty unique fight and a boss that's not in the Super Nintendo game, so I'll take that. And then we head into our last overworld here, which is going to be Big Ape City. And some people say it's like a prequel or a similarity to New Donk City. And they may have tried to work some of that into the original game before they revamped it, because there's like some cut characters here. I know there's supposed to be like a Donkey Kong with like a fedora. It's supposed to be inside this level. I don't know, he got cut at some point, and the similarity between this and New Donk City got eliminated. It would have been interesting to see how they would have made those connections. But regardless, we have Big Ape City here. And as a kid, I absolutely hated this level. It was almost like I don't even know if I ever beat the game as a kid, but I remember being in this level forever because there are so many timed perfect platforming elements inside the level, and playing on the old, not even the Game Boy Pocket or Game Boy Color, the original, you know, the big old Game Boy, man, it was hard to see some of those platforms, and I don't think I ever beat it. But regardless, I have nothing but distasteful memories for Big Ape City. Now the first level starts off in just simply a cityscape here, and you have these little balloons that deflate and inflate, and you have to hop on them, and of course you have to hop onto the next one before it deflates. And it's pretty easy at first, because if you fall, you simply fall back down to the little ledge here. But as the game progresses, you're hopping from balloon to balloon to balloon, and there's nothing below you, so it's an instant death as you go, and that's really frustrating. And also something that I noticed inside the level here is some of the ledges on the edges of buildings, they actually end earlier than the sprite itself, and so you just end up falling off in the hole. I mean, there's no telling how many edges I fell off trying to get my jumps just right, and I know if this happened to me as an adult here, that's probably one of the reasons I had such a hard time as a kid and just simply kept dying in these levels. But overall, this level here has a ton of like time perfect jumps, and it also has a bonus level, and you think, hey, finally another bonus level, and they're scattered throughout the game. But this bonus level, it took me straight to one of those little cloud areas with that little platform again that I hated so much. I'm like, forget that, I just jump off, I'm not playing that again. And this level here, man, it's just hard. Platforms are difficult, timing's just right. I just don't like it. Now level 2 is a good bit easier. In level 2 you have to collect the little KONG letters, but it's not actually to save the game. In this level you have to collect them, and you have to jump on a little button here. It actually brings the letters down, spaces them out for you to run over like a little bridge. So you have to collect KONG again, push the little button down for the next part, makes like a little stairway. Then collect KONG again, makes another little bridge. You have to collect these throughout the level. And it's a unique mechanic. It's surprising they really did it for just one level in the entire game. why they brought it in for just that. But regardless, it is a unique mechanic and it does break the gameplay up a little bit, and it's so much easier than the first level that was a breath of fresh air. Now I'm actually going to group level 3 and level 4 together because they're like almost identical as far as like mechanic wise and also aesthetic wise, and they focus so much on just time perfect barrel blasting. I mean like just literal perfect, because the barrels go all the way around. If you shoot in the wrong direction, you just fall straight in the hole. And I mean, this is like annoyance to its pinnacle. I mean, I was frustrated in the other level, and it's still like I think the worst level in the game. It's a little platform just because of pure frustration. Well, this one you're going to die so much in this level. And as I was going through it, I couldn't help but like remember back to when I was a kid trying to go through this, and how annoyed I'd get then too, just trying to get through it and end up dying and having to go back to the last level I actually collected the KONG at, because that's really hard in these levels to actually do it. And this is just like a block in the game as far as like difficulty wise in order to actually finish the game. But then there was level 5, and level 5 was like a little gift from heaven, because as I was going through the level at the very beginning, I was getting a little too hasty because I was getting annoyed, and I ran right off the edge. And as I ran off the edge, the finish music started playing. I was like, well, that's weird. And the map loaded back up, and I went on to the next level. There's a glitch in the game that if you just simply run off the edge at the very first part of the level, you win the level. I had no idea about the glitch. I wish I had known this as a kid. It made my life 1,000 times easier, but regardless, level 5 is completed. I didn't even bother to go back into it to look at it, because this is simply journeying through the game, and we journeyed through and we beat level 5. Now level 6 is nowhere as easy as level 5 was, because that was a glitch in the game, but it's still way easier than anything else inside this overworld here, because all you have to do here is just simply hop on little switches. It turns the barrels in the direction based on the switch. Super easy to know which direction to go in. It's where all the bananas are, and you can have this level beat pretty much first try. Almost no chance of dying. Super easy level. Feels really out of place inside the overworld. Want to put the easy level toward the end? I don't know. But level 7 continues on that streak. Level 7 even easier. You're going through the city once again. Super easy to collect all the KONG letters because they want you to be able to save before the final boss here. Super easy level. And it's just so weird. Like they put the easy levels at the end of the game, and they put the hardest levels at the beginning of this overworld. And it's just such a weird mishmash of how the levels should have progressed. But regardless, I'm going to take it. I got the KONG letters, can actually save the game before heading into King K. Rool. Now when you go into the battle to fight against King K. Rool, this is going to be the most traditional fight or traditional boss battle in the entire game. As far as like having a massive like scrolling level here, the boss is a little bit bigger than you, actually has an attack, and travels across from one side to the other. And of course all he does is takes his crown off, throws it at you, have to jump over it, hop on his head, and of course he runs off to the other side, throws his crown again, you have to jump on his little head, and goes to the other side, takes his crown off, throws it again, same thing over and over. Stage 2 mixes up a little bit. He actually starts jumping in the air and doing like a little belly blast or belly flop on the ground. Really easy to dodge that as well. Just dodge it a few times, then he goes back to his little crown trick again, hop on his head a few more times, and you have the battle won. Super easy battle to go through. All the boss battles in the game are pretty darn easy, but that was true of the Super Nintendo games as well. But regardless, super easy boss battles, super easy to finish the game, and the game really like gypped out on giving you any sort of story here, because at the end of the game you don't get a cutscene, you don't get any really reward, you get the word congratulations on the screen, and that's it. Congratulations. What a letdown. And then the credits begin to roll. That was a very, very disappointing ending. Like I said, I don't know if I ever beat it as a kid, but if I had beaten it, I can't imagine feeling anything but disappointment by seeing the word congratulations and that being all. And when you finish the game, you can go back into your save file, go through the levels again, make sure you collect all the little coins throughout the level, collect all the little KONG pieces throughout the level. I didn't collect it all going through the game the first time. My whole goal here is just simply to journey through the game, experience all the levels. But if you want to do all that, it could take you hours and hours and hours to find all of those. The KONG are useful as far as like saving the game. The coins throughout the game, I would consider those almost useless, because if you collect them, you can find little bonus areas, and you use the bonus areas to push the button down and it shoots those coins back at you. And if you get them, you get a little 1-up. And that's sort of nice, but it's not like it's necessary in the game, and it's definitely not worth going out of your way to collect all the coins for that. But if you want to get 100% on your file, you do have to collect the coins and the KONG, which I just didn't do. So how exactly does Donkey Kong Land shape up as an overall in 2023? And to me, it's a bit of a mishmash here. To me, it's not that great of a Game Boy game. To me, it's not aged super well. And I'm not talking about just the graphics here. The graphics have aged pretty horribly when it comes to that. They're difficult to see in a lot of cases. The foreground and the background are difficult to separate. It'd been better if they just sort of designed it from the ground up instead of trying to reuse the Super Nintendo models and just scaling them down. That was a pretty big mistake. I don't think the game has aged well when it comes to that, which does affect the playability because it is harder to see the game. It's not a timeless look to this game. But even outside of that, Some of the other factors did not age as well either. Some of the gameplay, it's a little unbalanced, like I said earlier. Some of the levels are really easy at the start of an overworld or start of a world, and then they're really hard to start of an overworld, and they get really easy, where it should be a little bit easier to the harder. I mean, it should increase in difficulty, not start off with the most difficult. Some of the platforming elements, they were a little bit off on the Game Boy, as far as like trying to hit your jumps just right when you couldn't see the screen real well, or just sometimes ledges weren't really well made into the game. I mean, that was a flaw inside the game as well. The animals were sort of missing in the game. The animals were really lackluster. They were a big part in the SNES games. I really loved getting the animals in the game, and these were just these were sort of a letdown when it came to that. The bosses throughout the game, they were okay. Some were pretty good, like King K. Rool, or like the clam matched up with the level. The mole was pretty fun, but then you had like the manta ray from the first level. Like, they couldn't think of something better for that. They could have done like anything for it, and that was a big letdown as well. And to only have 4 bosses and one of them be absolutely horrible, you know, 1 okay, 2 pretty good. That's not really good for the boss ratio. The overworld itself was a little bit of a mismatch as far as like levels lining up with the overworld, because you'd be going into what you thought was like a cliff level. You go into the caves, you'd be going into what you thought was a ruins level. You go underwater, you'd be going into what you thought was a forest level. You end up going into a snow area. It's like they just sort of took the levels and just sort of threw them at the game, and whatever you randomly got is what you got. They really could have aligned those a little bit better as you went. I felt like that was a little bit of a letdown. The only level that like really lined up super well would have been probably the last level, Big Ape City. That's the only one that like truly lined up. All the other ones was just like random levels thrown in there. Now, it sounds like I really hate the game and I'm just throwing out a bunch of negatives, but there were some positive things as well. Some of the gameplay throughout the game, it did match pretty well as far as like what the actual Super Nintendo games were. As far as like, you know, speed being a reward, as far as like running through the levels as fast as you can, hitting all the enemies, man, that felt great. It felt just like the Donkey Kong Country games. Also the soundtrack, there were several songs in the game that would really stand out for this particular Game Boy game, and I could see myself loading up on YouTube and listening to those particular songs sometimes. Yeah, the overall soundtrack's not as good as Donkey Kong Country, but there are some tracks on here that stand the test of time that will be up there with the Donkey Kong greats. But as an overall, do I see myself going back and playing Donkey Kong Land 1 again in the future? Obviously, I'll do 2 and 3 at some point as I'm going through all these games here, but do I see myself playing Donkey Kong Land 1 again? I mean, between all the time put in as a child, going through it again now, I think I've had my fill. I think I'm probably done with Donkey Kong Land. I don't see myself going back to it again, probably at any point, because if I find myself wanting to play Donkey Kong, I'll probably just play Donkey Kong Country on a Super Nintendo, because they're better in almost every way. These were really designed for kids like me that didn't have a Super Nintendo, that just wanted to play Donkey Kong on the Game Boy, or people who just wanted a little bit extra out of Donkey Kong Country and wanted to play it on the Game Boy. But now there's so many Donkey Kong Country games, I just can't imagine most people wanting to go back and play this particular one. But what do you all think? Do you enjoy Donkey Kong Land? Do you see yourself going back and playing it again in the future? Do you think it's aged well? Do you think it's aged poorly? Let me know in the comments down below. And if there's a Game Boy game you want to see me journey through soon, let me know that in the comments down below, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I can. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out my other videos listed up above. And as always, go out there, find a great game to play. Just simply have a great rest of the day.